A farmhouse sitting on acres of Minnesota land that most 22-year-olds could not dream of owning. A kid who grew up in one of Atlanta's hardest neighborhoods, who now wakes up every morning to open fields, fresh air, and the kind of quiet that you only find when you are genuinely far from everything. And a superstar who is already being compared to the greatest basketball players alive, who goes home after games to a property that looks nothing like what you would expect from the most exciting young player in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is not your typical young NBA star, and his Minnesota farmhouse is the proof. Ant Edwards was born on August 5, 2001 in Atlanta, Georgia. College Park specifically, a neighborhood in southwest Atlanta that sits just outside the city proper, and that has produced some of the most resilient and hungry people in the South. College Park in the early 2000s was not easy. It was the kind of neighborhood that required awareness, where you understood your surroundings and who was in them, because that understanding was a daily practical necessity rather than an academic exercise. His childhood was more difficult than most people know. His mother passed away when he was a young child. His grandmother raised him for a period. Then his grandmother passed away too. He lost two of the most important people in his life before most kids his age were dealing with anything more serious than homework. He has talked about this in interviews with a directness and a lack of self-pity that genuinely surprises people who hear it for the first time. Not performing toughness, just describing what happened and acknowledging that it shaped him in ways that show up every time he steps on a basketball court. He went to Holy Spirit Preparatory School in Atlanta and then transferred to Holy Spirit before landing at Hateville Charter Career Academy, where he became one of the most recruited high school players in the country. He was not just good, he was electric, the kind of player who made people stop what they were doing and watch, because something about the combination of his athleticism, his competitiveness, and his personality created a gravity that no amount of coaching could manufacture. He went to the University of Georgia for one season. And despite shooting numbers that scouts found concerning, he was selected first overall by the Minnesota Timberwolves in the 2020 NBA Draft. First overall, 18 years old. Straight to Minnesota. Minnesota is about as far from College Park, Atlanta as you can get in the continental United States. Climatically, culturally, geographically, everything about the transition required adjustment. What Anthony Edwards did with that adjustment, and specifically where he chose to live once he had the means to live anywhere, tells you something important about who he actually is underneath the dunks and the smile and the charisma that fills every arena he walks into. The farmhouse, what he actually chose. When most NBA players get their first real contract, they immediately start looking at the most prestigious addresses in whatever city they are playing in, the luxury high-rise downtown, the gated community where other athletes and celebrities live, the penthouse with the city view that signals to anyone who visits that you have arrived. Anthony Edwards looked at Minnesota and chose a farmhouse, not a property styled to look rustic while actually being a luxury mansion with farmhouse aesthetics. An actual farmhouse on actual land outside the Twin Cities. A property that sits on acres of Minnesota terrain with the kind of space and openness and genuine rural character that you only get when you go past the suburbs and find the real countryside. The property is in the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area, but positioned far enough from the urban core that the neighborhood energy is genuinely rural. Wide open land, mature trees along the property's edges, a long driveway that separates the house from the road and creates the buffer between his private life and everything outside of it that he has been deliberate about building. The main house is a large farmhouse-style structure that has been updated and renovated to accommodate the needs of a young NBA star, while maintaining the character that made it the right choice in the first place. The exterior is what you expect from genuine Minnesota farmhouse architecture. Practical, sturdy, built for weather, that gets serious and stays serious for months at a time. The kind of structure that looks like it has been standing in this landscape for decades, because it has. Inside the house is warm, in a way that luxury properties sometimes are not. High ceilings in the main living areas, but not the theatrical kind. The proportions feel human, like a house where someone actually lives rather than a property staged for a real estate listing. Wide plank floors throughout the ground level. A main living room built around a fireplace that becomes the center of the house during Minnesota winters when the temperature drops to places that College Park, Atlanta, never prepared him for. The kitchen is large and functional. A big central island, serious appliances, the kind of setup that accommodates the specific eating requirements of a 22-year-old athlete in the prime of physical development, which is to say enormous amounts of high-quality food prepared regularly and consumed with the enthusiasm of someone who burns thousands of calories every night playing basketball. There is a game room. This is Anthony Edwards we are talking about, the man whose personality is as large as his game. A property without a dedicated space for competition and entertainment would not fit who he is. The game room is exactly what you imagine. Serious gaming setup, good screens, the kind of room where teammates come over and the competitive energy from the basketball court spills over into whatever is on the screen. The primary suite has a private terrace that looks out over the property's acreage in a way that gives you the morning view that makes you understand why he chose this. Waking up in a Minnesota high-rise gives you city. Waking up at this farmhouse gives you land and sky and quiet. For a young man who grew up in the specific noise and density of College Park, and then landed in one of the most intense professional environments in sports, that quiet has a value that does not show up on the property listing. Outside is where the farmhouse earns its name fully. Acres of land that are genuinely his. Open sections of Minnesota terrain that in the summer are green in a way that Georgia prepares you for, but that arrive here differently, cooler, wider, more northern in their quality. A large open section behind the main house where he plays basketball outdoors when the weather allows. A hoop in the driveway that gets used not for training purposes but for the pure pleasure of shooting around in your own space without anyone watching. There is a garage that houses his vehicles, and we will get to those, but also serves as a general purpose workshop and storage space that a property with this much land requires for basic operational maintenance. He has been expanding the property since his first contract, adding infrastructure, improving what was already there, thinking about the land as something permanent rather than a temporary stop while he figures out what comes next. He knows what comes next. He is staying in Minnesota, and he is building accordingly. A first overall pick who chose a farmhouse over a penthouse. That choice alone tells you everything about what kind of person Anthony Edwards actually is, why Minnesota, and why this property. Here's the thing that most people miss about Anthony Edwards and his relationship with Minnesota. He did not end up here by accident and then make peace with it. He genuinely chose to stay. When the Timberwolves drafted him in 2020, the assumption in most basketball circles was that Minnesota was a temporary situation. A young player from Atlanta getting his feet under him in a smaller market before eventually landing in Los Angeles or New York or one of the cities that superstar players traditionally migrate toward when free agency arrives. That assumption has been consistently wrong about Edwards, and he has been consistent about correcting it. He has said publicly and repeatedly that he loves Minnesota, not the polite version of loving a place that athletes deploy to keep their current fan base happy before they leave. The genuine version. The version where he is buying property and expanding it and putting roots into the ground in a way that costs him real money and reflects real intention. Minnesota received Anthony Edwards in a specific way, not the way a city receives a visiting celebrity. The way a city receives someone who showed up and took it seriously. He took the winters seriously, which in Minnesota is the fundamental test of whether you are a real Minnesotan or just visiting. He took the community seriously. He took the Timberwolves seriously at a time when the franchise had been through years of difficulty and the fan base had developed a reasonable wariness about investing fully in players who might leave. He did not leave. He signed his supermax extension, a deal worth over $260 million over 5 years, and he did it in Minnesota. He committed. The farmhouse is the physical expression of that commitment. You do not buy and expand a farmhouse on significant acreage in the Minnesota countryside if you are planning to request a trade in 2 years. The farmhouse specifically reflects something about what he needed from his home environment, given what his professional environment demands. Every night he plays basketball in front of 20,000 people in Target Center with the full weight of a city's sports hopes on his shoulders. The pressure of being the face of a franchise, the expectation of a fan base that has waited years for someone like him, the media attention and the social media scrutiny, and the constant public presence that comes with being the most exciting young player in the NBA, all of that is real, and all of it is intense. The farmhouse is where none of that is present, where he is just a young man from Atlanta on his land in Minnesota, and the only thing deciding how the morning goes is what he feels like doing when he wakes up. That balance, intense public professional life met with genuine private rural retreat, is something that athletes who build long and sustainable careers learn to find. Edwards found it early. The cars. Because he is still 22. Anthony Edwards is not a car minimalist. Let us be honest about that. He is a 22-year-old from Atlanta with over $200 million guaranteed and the specific energy of someone who enjoys the rewards of what he has built without apologizing for it. The farmhouse is the serious side of his financial life. The cars are the fun side. He drives a Lamborghini Urus, the SUV version of the Lamborghini range, in a color that announces itself. He has been photographed in it around the Twin Cities with the specific energy of someone who bought exactly what he wanted and has no complicated feelings about it. He has a Mercedes-Benz Maybach that comes out for occasions that call for something with more gravitas than a bright Lamborghini. The Maybach is what you drive when you want the comfort and the presence without the sports car energy. He has a pickup truck for the farmhouse, because the farmhouse requires it, because when you have significant acreage in Minnesota, you need a vehicle that can do actual work, and the Lamborghini is not the right tool for driving across a field to check on something at the far end of the property. The truck does not get photographed much. The Lamborghini gets photographed constantly. This ratio accurately reflects his personality. He is someone who does what he wants, enjoys what he has built, and is completely unbothered by what anyone thinks about any of it. His car choices are consistent with who he is. Young, successful, unfiltered, having fun with the rewards while also owning a farmhouse on acres of Minnesota land, because he understands the difference between things that are fun and things that build something permanent. He drives a Lamborghini to practice and goes home to a farmhouse with a driveway hoop. That combination is Anthony Edwards in one sentence. Like and subscribe. We are just getting started. The Timberwolves years, what he is building. Anthony Edwards is in the early stages of what everyone watching can see is going to be an extraordinary career. His first season in Minnesota was a development year, learning the NBA game, adjusting to the professional level, finding his footing in a franchise that needed him to be patient while things were being built around him. He was good immediately, not the cleaned-up version of good that gets applied to young players to manage expectations. Actually good. The dunks, the pull-up jumpers, the defensive moments that reminded you he was not just an offensive player. By his third season, he was one of the best players in the league. By his fourth, he was leading the Timberwolves to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in decades. A franchise that had been waiting for something like this for 20 years was suddenly relevant, and he was the reason why. The supermax extension, $263 million over 5 years, confirmed what his play had already established. He is the cornerstone. He is the reason Minnesota matters in the NBA conversation going forward. He is 22 years old with a $250 million commitment from his franchise and a farmhouse he is expanding because he intends to be there for all of it. The comparisons to the greats have started, and they are going to intensify as he develops. His combination of size, athleticism, shooting ability, and the specific kind of competitive fire that you cannot teach and cannot fake places him in a category of players that come along rarely enough that when one arrives, the entire basketball world pays attention. He is paying attention to his money the same way he pays attention to the game. The farmhouse is one piece of a financial structure that his team is building carefully around an athlete who understands early what many athletes never figure out, that the contract is the starting point, not the destination. The community, how he gives back to Minnesota. Anthony Edwards has not been a passive presence in the Twin Cities community. He has been engaged in a way that reflects genuine investment in the place he has chosen to build his life. His work with youth basketball programs in Minneapolis has been consistent and personal. He shows up to clinics not as a celebrity making an appearance, but as someone who wants to be there. The kids who come to those sessions get the real version of Anthony Edwards, the one who talks to them like they are people rather than an audience, who gets on the floor with them, who remembers what it felt like to be a talented kid in a difficult neighborhood who needed someone to tell him that what he had was real and worth pursuing. He has been involved in community events in both Minneapolis and St. Paul that reflect his understanding that being the face of the Timberwolves comes with responsibility to the broader Twin Cities community, not just the arena crowd, the neighborhoods that the arena exists inside. His presence at local businesses, restaurants, shops, the everyday infrastructure of the Twin Cities has a warmth that reflects genuine affection for the place rather than obligatory celebrity engagement. People who run into him in the Twin Cities consistently describe the same experience. He is present, he is warm, he is completely normal in a way that someone with his fame and his contract does not have to be and chooses to be anyway. The farmhouse is part of this community commitment. Buying land in Minnesota, improving it, putting money into a property that will be there for decades is the kind of investment that a person makes in a place they intend to belong to permanently. He belongs to Minnesota now in a way that goes beyond a contract. What the farmhouse actually represents. Here's the real story underneath the property details and the car collection and the contract numbers. Anthony Edwards grew up without stable housing as a constant in his life. He lost his mother. He lost his grandmother. He moved between arrangements with the specific anxiety of a child who does not have full certainty about what the next chapter of his living situation looks like. He is 22 years old and he owns a farmhouse on acres of land in Minnesota. The farmhouse is not just a property. It is the specific answer to the specific instability of his childhood. It is the thing that cannot be taken away. The land that he owns completely, that has his name on the deed, that will be there tomorrow and the year after and the decade after. Permanent in a way that his early life never was. He has not said this explicitly in interviews. He does not need to. Anyone who knows where he started and looks at where he chose to build understands it without the explanation. The choice of a farmhouse over a penthouse is not just aesthetic preference. It is a young man who grew up with no land, choosing to own as much of it as possible as early as possible, because the ground beneath your feet is the most fundamental form of security that exists. He is 22. He has over $260 million guaranteed. He has a farmhouse on acres of Minnesota land. He has a Lamborghini in the driveway and a hoop he shoots around on in the evenings. He went from College Park to the first overall pick to a supermax to a farmhouse that he is expanding every year because he intends to be there for a very long time. Not bad for a kid from Atlanta who lost everything twice before he was old enough to drive. From College Park, Atlanta, where he lost his mother and his grandmother before most kids his age had faced any serious loss, to a farmhouse on acres of Minnesota land where he he wakes up every morning to open fields and quiet and the specific peace of someone who built something permanent early enough to enjoy it for a long time. Anthony Edwards is the most exciting young player in the NBA. He is also, quietly and deliberately, one of the most financially grounded young athletes in professional sports. The farmhouse is the proof. Not the Lamborghini in the driveway, not the supermax contract, the farmhouse, the land, the choice to put roots in the ground in Minnesota when he could have chosen anything else. That choice is the story. Which part of Anthony Edwards' Minnesota life surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Every week we go inside the properties and the real lives of the people the sports world talks about every day. See you in the next one.